Ark Survival Ascended, the Unreal Engine 5 remaster of the original Ark Survival Evolved, which was launched in the summer of 2015, has had a somewhat rocky start. From the lack of any sort of marketing to delays to both console ports, it has been far from smooth sailing for Studio Wildcard's latest adventure. So I thought it was about time that I put my politics degree to some good use and sit down and write an essay for you all on what I perceive to be the problem with Ark Survival Ascended. I'll be splitting this video into different chapters, going over the initial announcement of Ark Survival Ascended and the promises of the game, to the launch and reception, the current state, and finally a look to the future, where we discuss what this game and Studio Wildcard need to do to unlock the full potential of Ark Survival Ascended. If you do enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And also, I would love if you could come and sub to my recently launched second channel for some more Ark Survival Ascended content. Without further ado, grab your popcorn and let's discuss the problem, or perhaps I should say problems, with Ark Survival Ascended. Chapter 1. The announcement and delays. Our first tease of what would become Ark Survival Ascended was in January of 2023, when Studio Wildcard co-founder Jeremy Stieglitz tweeted that Ark Survival Evolved would be receiving a completely free upgrade/remaster in Unreal Engine 5. A couple of months down the line, on the 31st of March, we received Community Crunch 355, which gave us a whole lot of information. Firstly, Ark 2 was to be delayed until late 2024, which I think just about everyone at the time saw coming, but also the announcement of Ark Survival Ascended, the previously free Unreal Engine 5 remaster of Ark Survival Evolved, which was now set to be priced at $49.99 and would have its own roadmap spanning the next 18 months or so, as well as including additional DLCs. Now, this bundle did also include Ark 2, a game which no one had seen a single speck of gameplay for. Now, this stored quite a stir in the Ark community, especially as Wildcard also planned to charge once more for the DLCs such as Scorched Earth, Aberration, and the Genesis maps. I could do a completely separate video on this drama, as it was quite the time to be alive in the Ark community, but not long after, Wildcard did do a massive climb down, removed the bundle, and instead opted to include all the original Survival Evolved DLC for the same price as the Ark 2 bundle had been. Now, the big question is, why did things change so fast? How did a free update go from something that wouldn't even require the wiping of official servers, according to Jeremy himself, to a completely paid remaster? Did Wildcard completely underestimate how difficult it would be to port the game to Unreal Engine 5? It's certainly possible. Given what has been announced now with the last ASA maps releasing in November 2025, were they really that naive though? It's impossible to know, but one thing we do know is that Snail Games have had a big say in it. Now, if you don't know who Snail Games are, then perhaps you've been hiding under a rock for the past year and a bit. And if you are, up until this point, having a pretty positive perception of how the owners of the Ark franchise view the game, it might be a good idea to return to said rock. Now, in this video, I'm not going to delve too much into the financials of Snail Games, as I think there are already some quite excellent videos out there doing just that, but I think most people are quite aware that Snail Games have been struggling. Ark has always been the moneymaker for Snail Games, and it had almost been 2 years since the release of the last official DLC for Ark Survival Evolved, which was of course Genesis Part 2. With Snail Games' other projects being absolute dumpster fires or abandoned projects that had just been left to die, they were incredibly reliant on the revenue that Ark Survival Evolved generated. This of course is where the Ark 2 discussion comes in. Originally announced in 2020, yes, you did hear that right, almost 4 years ago now, at the Game Awards, Ark 2 was said to be the future of Ark. It was stated to have a holiday 2022 release date, and given this was still over 2 years away, this sounded pretty reasonable. We would still have a couple more DLCs for Ark 1, followed by Ark 2, and the roadmap for Wildcard and Snail Games was looking pretty good. But somewhere along this road, Ark 2 has clearly hit not just a bump in it, but a complete blockage. Since ASA has been released, we haven't heard a thing more about it, which was no more telling than during the Extra Life charity stream, where Survival Ascended was described as the new face of Ark. It was delayed twice, originally until 2023, and then of course upon the announcement of ASA until late 2024. I don't imagine many people watching this video right now believe that it will actually release then, but that is besides the point. The point is that the higher-ups at Snail Games needed cash. The stock price was plummeting, and another paid DLC for a game still running on the previous Unreal Engine wasn't really an option. So that led us to where we are today, with an early access remaster, which has undeniably showed a lot of promise, but clearly could have done with another 6 months in the oven, and has been shoved out as soon as possible so that Snail Games can reap the financial gain. The initial reaction to the announcement of Ark Survival Ascended can only be described as a mixed bag. Some people saw it as a huge cash grab and weren't impressed with it whatsoever, while others were more optimistic about it. In the weeks and months that followed, I had so many faces pop into my Twitch chat or leave a YouTube comment just to ask me what I thought of Ark Survival Ascended. And honestly, I was pretty positive, but we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So, to the first problem, the delays in marketing. Ark Survival Ascended was meant to launch in August of 2023, and with treble the amount of content that it ended up launching with. Wildcard, by their own admission, had never been the greatest at ETAs, but we were meant to be getting the Island, Scorched Earth, and a revamped Survival of the Fittest game mode all in August of this year. The news did of course come at the start of July in Community Crunch 368 that in fact the game would be delayed until October, and that Scorched Earth would be pushed back until December, with the Island being the only playable map at launch. Interestingly, Survival of the Fittest received no mention at all in this crunch. People were understandably frustrated by the delay, but due to the complete lack of marketing up until this point, and lack of anything of substance being shown for ASA, it wasn't entirely unexpected. Scorched being put back until December was for sure a disappointment, but it would allow people 6 to 8 weeks to enjoy playing the island once more, before potentially moving on to the next map. And with Wildcard throwing out lines like it wouldn't be feasible to complete Scorched Earth to a standard we're happy with, I think most people, myself included, were pretty forgiving on that one. One thing that people weren't so forgiving with was the bizarre lack of any sort of marketing for the game. I alluded earlier that I had plenty of people leaving comments or coming into my streams to hear my views on the upcoming game, but I had just as many leaving messages just simply asking what Ark Survival Ascended even was. The reality was that if you weren't engaged within the Ark Survival Evolved community, there was little promotion going on. The main information that was released was during the community crunches, but even that was pretty rare, and we constantly found ourselves asking for more. Every Friday, the Ark community would brace itself for some news, and most of the time, we ended up disappointed. The reality is that most of the hype for Ark Survival Ascended was built by the existing community, with various news channels jumping on messages from the devs in the Discord and releasing news to the community. If you didn't keep up to date with this stuff, you would be completely forgiven for not realizing a new Ark was even launching. Anyway, I think to further this discussion, it's time that we enter Chapter 2, the launch. So, Ark Survival Ascended finally burst onto the scene on the 25th of October. Completely out of the blue, the long wait for any sort of gameplay was over, and the trailer was released during an Xbox Game Showcase event with the words "coming soon" at the bottom. Minutes later, Wildcard uploaded the same trailer to their own YouTube with the words "available today" at the end, which as you can imagine caused all sorts of carnage amongst the Ark community. In the build-up to the release of the trailer, members of the community, myself included, had jokes about them randomly dropping the game alongside the trailer, but I don't think many people actually thought they would do it. Of course, the coming soon on the Xbox event trailer can probably be explained by the console delay, which was confirmed via the description of the YouTube trailer. It was a messy launch to say the least, and didn't help that the PC version kept being put back hour after hour even on launch day. The whole launch fiasco just confirmed to everyone something that we already knew, which was of course how rushed this game was. To still be finalising the final build of the game on the day it's meant to release was quite astonishing. I think now it is time that we need to talk a little bit about the Nitrado agreement. Now, I don't personally want this video to delve too much into the whole Nitrado issue. There are numerous excellent analysis videos out there of this whole agreement, and if you want to know more, I would really recommend going and checking some of them out. The simple breakdown of it all is this though. Nitrado paid Snail Games to have the rights to host Ark Survival Ascended servers. Now this video is not about monopolies and that whole situation, and while I am completely against them, the more important thing to mention here is how that agreement stated that Wildcard would have to have Ark Survival Ascended out before the end of October. If they didn't, they would have to instead give Nitrado a good portion of the profits of Ark Survival Evolved post-October. Like I said, there are some really good videos out there that go into a bit more detail on this, but one thing was clear. ASA had to launch before the end of October, and there was no way that Snail Games would allow it not to. This all contributed to the absolute mess of a launch we got, where the game was launched the same day as the trailer was released for PC, and then delayed for consoles right at the last minute, despite Wildcard themselves reassuring people that release was on track just days before. Now, I completely believe them when they say the certification build for consoles hit a snag, and ASA has of course now launched on consoles in the weeks that have come since. But this whole rushed launch with consoles being delayed at the last minute was caused by that agreement with Nitrado, which still to this day has left quite a sour taste in some people's mouths. I'm sure in Wildcard's eyes they would have liked to have 1. Had more time to develop the overall port of the game, and 2. Delayed the PC release so that they could launch on all platforms at the same time, as of course since they have released console later, they've had to faff around with releasing new servers, increasing the rates on those servers so that the console players and tribes could catch up to the already established PC players. And while we are on the subject of servers, while PC players did get to enjoy the game earlier than console players, these servers were absolutely terrible at launch. As someone who plays on the official PvP servers, I can't quite explain to you how bad the servers were for the first couple of weeks. Servers would come up for a maximum of 1 hour or 2 before going down, sometimes taking a long time to boot back up. And when they did come back online, there was always a massive rollback. It made playing on official servers incredibly frustrating, and I'm pretty sure this was something which affected both PvE and PvP players. We'll talk more about the servers and performance in the next section of this video, but there's no other way to describe the launch of them as an absolute shit show. And it wasn't just servers that suffered from these issues. Single player and private servers suffered from their own issues. I know from speaking to both friends and content creators, as well as experiencing it myself a little bit, how many people had serious issues with the game crashing over and over, something which sadly 6 weeks after release hasn't been completely resolved. To make matters worse, on the day of launch, there was one very common problem which people had. This problem was that even the top spec PCs were experiencing severe FPS issues, with many of them simply refunding the game, deeming that it was unplayable. And it's honestly hard to blame them. While the game will of course become better optimized with time, I can completely understand people not wanting to pay full price for a pretty much unoptimized game with only a fraction of the content of its predecessor. A good portion of these people will most likely pick up Ark Survival Ascended once more in the future, but for an already discounted price. The idea of a remaster launching in such a state just doesn't sit right with me, which brings me on to the last part of this chapter. So what was my main problem with the Ark Survival Ascended launch? Well, obviously it is a lot of the above already discussed, but there is more to it than just that. When I was always asked by my community about my thoughts on Ark Survival Ascended, I was always pretty positive about the game, and to me, it just made sense. No longer would Ark be held back by the now outdated Unreal Engine 4, and with Ark Survival Evolved being bigger than Wildcard ever thought it would be upon the launch, I thought the promise of launching the game from the ground up, completely remastered with a brand new codebase, was a pretty great idea. However, that wasn't to say that I didn't have my doubts. Remasters often get pretty bad press these days, probably because a lot of them just do feel like lazy cash grabs. I said that from day one, Ark Survival Ascended would have to launch in a far, far better state than Ark Survival Evolved did in 2015. When Survival Evolved did release in 2015, it was a game which clearly showed a lot of promise, and immediately became extremely popular on the content scene. Many people, however, couldn't play the game at first, due to poor performance optimization or game-breaking bugs. Sounds familiar, right? At the time, people understandably gave Wildcard a free pass, with it being their first major project, and appreciating the vision that was there, already on show for a fantastic game. And over the years, Wildcard repaid this faith shown in them by the community. However, for the remaster of the same game to release in a very, very similar state to what ASE did almost a decade ago now, for me, is completely unforgivable. I've alluded multiple times in this video already that I don't put this blame squarely at Wildcard's door either. This was likely due to a rushed release date set by their superiors, but ultimately I can only talk about what's in front of me and what I've played so far. Anyway, it's time to move on to the present and take a look at how the game has changed since release. Chapter 3, the present. It has currently been 6 weeks since the launch of Ark Survival Ascended, and a lot has changed, and a lot has not. The game certainly runs smoother than it did at launch, thanks to several post-launch patches, but various issues with servers, console commands, exploits, and of course the release date for consoles have certainly not helped with the current perception of the game amongst the community. Thankfully, we have now reached a point where Ark Survival Ascended is out on all platforms, and I think to most people's surprise, the game appears to be running fairly smoothly on Xbox and PlayStation. I think on day one of Ark Survival Ascended, when people were seeing 30 and even 40 series graphics cards struggling with the game, people were very skeptical of how this game would run on consoles, with some claiming that it wouldn't run at all. Being able to play crossplay now is something that is a super nice feature in Ark Survival Ascended, and on my own sub-servers, I love being able to combine all of my communities back into one server. But I think it's about time that we get into one of my main problems of Ark Survival Ascended, something that has been nagging away at me from the release, and just become a whole lot more apparent to me in the past couple of weeks. By the close of Ark Survival Evolved, we had 6 official story DLCs, a host of official turn mod maps, and then of course an array of excellent game-changing mods which added so much to the Ark community and of course the content scene. Last weekend, we finally did get the news of the Ark Survival Ascended updated roadmap for the 3rd time, which spans into the latter stages of 2025. This means that we will have to wait 2 years from the release of the base game to play Fjordor, the map that helped Ark Survival Evolved reach its top ever player base upon its release. Now for me at least, there is a debate about whether a remaster should even launch in early access in the first place, but I do think that when taking into account the scale of Ark Survival Evolved, it makes sense that the game would be in early access for a short period of time, perhaps a year or so while the final pieces of the content are added, which the original roadmap intended. However, to launch the game with only the island, and as we learned during the Extra Life event recently, we are stuck with this until March of 2024, is just not it for me. Already so many players are getting bored of just playing the island, which, because it's simply, while the game looks a lot better, and there are quite a few nice quality of life features, it is essentially the same game map and game with returning bugs that were ironed out of ASE long ago. The fact that Ark Survival Evolved retains a solid player base, not much lower than Ascended's, is proof that right now, people feel reluctant to make the switch. And I do feel that that problem may only go away when the DLCs start to release next year. So how has it got to this stage that a map that was meant to launch with the game is now releasing in next March? I do find that quite staggering. In saying that, I am very glad that they are giving Scorched Earth some extra love. As I stated in my map ranking video a while back, while I do have a lot of love for the map, it was clearly rushed out the door at the time due to Wildcard's ongoing court case, which they needed the money for, and I am pleased that they are planning to flesh it out a little bit. I actually do think it is the correct decision to give it the time it deserves, rather than just rush it out the door. But this all just adds to the argument that the game should never have been allowed to launch in its current state, and perhaps a delay until about March next year would have been the smart decision. Had they done this with the game launching in 1, a more stable state due to a proper QA testing stage before launch, and 2, with both the Island and Scorched Earth coming out alongside Survival of the Fittest, as was originally intended, I don't think we would be having this video right now. Alas though, we are, and it is the Island that will remain until March. For official servers, this likely means no transfers until then, which of course directly affects unofficial servers as server clustering is not currently a thing. Of course, the silver lining to no server transfers right now is that the PvP side of the game is already full of cheaters. I don't want to go into this too much as there are already some great videos out there explaining the various issues in Ark Survival Ascended PvP, but essentially the official network is rife with cheaters. What doesn't help this is the fact that the enforcement team appears to be completely MIA and have responded to tickets with clear evidence of cheating with automated responses saying that they can't see anything that requires action. Quickly returning back to the discussion regarding the Ark roadmap that was released recently, it further fuels speculation that Ark 2 has been scrapped, or at least Ark 2 as we know it has been scrapped. Now, upon the announcement of Ark Survival Ascended, Ark 2 was said to be pushed back until the end of 2024, and on the roadmap there is an Ark Survival Ascended surprise. Now, what on earth this could be, I have no idea, but especially given the titling of it, I highly doubt that it is Ark 2. I'm not entirely sure what it is, but I certainly think it is something that is paid, whether that's a new expansion pack or something completely different. We know now that they have announced 2 new paid DLCs to be released after the original maps have been ported over, but that would mean it would be 2 years since the release of Ark Survival Ascended until Wildcard can get cracking on some proper paid DLC. I believe it is likely to be some sort of paid expansion of some sorts, and Wildcard aren't sure on how to sell it to the community yet, so that is why it is just simply labelled as a surprise. I would certainly love to hear your thoughts in the comments on what you think this surprise might be. One other thing that stood out to me in the Ark roadmap was how close the deadlines began to be as the maps start to release. For example, we go from almost waiting 6 months for Scorched Earth to believing that they're going to release 4 maps in 5 months in a time span from July to December next year. This to me just feels completely unrealistic, even if they do have separate teams working on the mod maps compared to the story maps. It feels like once again Wildcard are setting themselves up for failure. By their own admission they suck at ETAs, but in that case why not allow themselves extra time and release it early if they are ready to? Looking at this stacked roadmap, it really does make me think that perhaps not every single map should have made it over from Survival Evolved, especially with the non-story canon maps. As a huge fan of the Center in Ragnarok, I am so glad that they are coming over, but I also think that I would have been accepting if Wildcard had said, we want to bring you some brand new completely fresh experiences for the game, so we cannot commit to porting every single map over. The problem they have now is that they have committed to doing that, and people have brought the game expecting to see all of these maps over, so to row back on that now would be extremely risky to say the least. One last thing to mention from the Extra Life event is that we got the announcement of some paid optional DLC packs, which are said to add additional content to each story map. We're going to discuss this more in just a moment here, and go over why I see this as dangerous territory for Studio Wildcard and Ark Survival Ascended. Chapter 4, The Future. The final section of this video will look to the future and examine what Ark Survival Ascended has to do in order to surpass the legacy of its original Survival Evolved. A large proportion of this video has probably come across with quite a negative tone, but the truth is that I really do think the potential of this game is endless. I am no game programmer or game developer, but I do believe them when they say that getting to grips with a new engine is challenging. It is actually why I do think that the devs did a pretty good job overall with the island, given the relatively short amount of timescale that they had. I'm sure with a little bit more time they would have added far more quality of life changes, and the game would have also released in a much more stable state. I do believe, however, that there is a lot of pressure on the upcoming Scorched Earth release, as this map now needs to be bigger, better, and greater in every single aspect than the original was, to really justify the existence of Ark Survival Ascended. The devs have recently acknowledged that their servers are running pretty awfully, and have pledged to fix it. That is a type of honesty that myself, and I think most of the community, can actually get behind. It appears that cryopods are also on their way to the game any day now, and while I would like to see a few changes made to cryos to nerf them slightly, I think broadly that is going to be a good thing for all sides of the game. However, we cannot look to the future without talking about these DLC adventure packs that were first mentioned in the Extra Life event. Now, I'm not fundamentally against these types of things. I think most of the Ark community have been crying out for various optional skins and merchandise to buy for years now. It's a great way to support your favourite game without feeling the pressure or FOMO to buy, which you may experience with a standard DLC pack. The question is, how optional are these DLC adventure packs going to be? It sounds like the Scorched Earth package will feature a host of new engrams, a new creature and more, which on face value all sounds great and really exciting. The question in my opinion that needs answering is, how will these packs actually work? Now, I'll use this quick moment to say that I do run a PvE subserver for my community, which is open to all Patreons, Twitch subs, and while I would love to have you on there to be part of this amazing community, this isn't just a shameless plug section of the video. I'm assuming that once the DLC pack releases, I will have an option to enable it on my server. My current understanding of the situation is that should I enable it on my server, anyone without the DLC will no longer be able to join my server because they do not have the DLC pack. I can already see this being a huge controversy for Wildcard to deal with down the line. People may feel that they were sold a game with all included DLC, but when they can't actually join the majority of servers, they will then feel conned. It will be interesting to see what they decide to do with official servers, which will perhaps be another big debate at the time, but we'll just have to see how they play this one out. Perhaps come March this will all look like I'm massively overreacting and trying to preempt a problem that doesn't exist. Hopefully this will be the case, and I honestly hope so, but I am worried that there could be a storm coming with this one. I want nothing more for Ark Survival Ascended to succeed. I don't have 10,000 hours in this franchise for nothing, and overall I do obviously absolutely love the core concept of this game. I do genuinely believe that both the game and franchise could be in a fantastic place in just 6 months' time, but time will tell on that one. So, to conclude, what is the problem with Ark Survival Ascended? Well, I think it ultimately comes down to one word: time. This game has had not nearly enough time in the oven, and I imagine that just as the devs were starting to get a bit more confident with the engine, release date was due. The updated roadmap for me is a little bit of a worry, especially as I expect things to be rather dry until March. When March comes around and Scorched Earth releases, we may be singing a completely different tune. If Scorched Earth comes out in March and has been built fundamentally from the ground up, and has added a lot of additional content to that map, the future for Ark Survival Ascended may be looking a lot brighter. But with the Game Awards revealing some interesting upcoming survival games, you feel that Ark have got to make this upcoming next year count. They have to now stick to this brand new roadmap, and make sure not to stray too far away from it. They also need to actually remaster these upcoming maps and add lots of additional features that take full advantage of the new engine to make sure that it feels like a new experience for all players playing, whether they're veterans or new players. Ark Survival Ascended is a game that is full of such promise, but it also feels like in some ways that history could be repeating itself slightly. I truly believe that in a year's time, Ark Survival Ascended could be in a great place as the potential of the new engine is truly utilised. I also truly believe that this next year could be make or break for them. Time will tell if Survival Ascended can truly become the bigger brother of Ark Survival Evolved and essentially justify its existence in the Ark franchise. It's for sure going to be an interesting ride, and despite being one that I'm a little apprehensive of, I cannot wait to be a part of it. Anyway, I am now going to bring an end to this video essay, but I would of course love to hear your thoughts in the comments, so please do leave a comment and let me know what your thoughts are on Ark Survival Ascended in general. My name is Rampy, and if you have enjoyed the video, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Have a fantastic rest of your day, look after yourselves, and I will see you guys in the next one.